FanDuel presents Sunday Victories. When your internet goes down while you're streaming the Super Bowl, but it's game on once you guess your neighbor's Wi-Fi password. It was password. You bet and you won in the game of life. Now, if you want to bet on the game of football, try FanDuel. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $3,000 back in free bets.
21 plus and present in Virginia. First online real money wager only. Refund issued as non-withdrawable free bets that expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and it's our match report with me, Rich Ferraro. We're recording this just after getting back from a 1-0 victory against Leeds United at the City Ground on Sunday the 5th of February, which will henceforth be known as Keylor Navas Day. Brennan Johnson's goal after just 14 minutes was enough to see the Reds over the line, along with some determined defending and some great saves from the debutant veteran goalkeeper. Forest lined up with Navas in goal, Nico Williams and Renan Loddy at fullback, Willy Bolly and Scott McKenna at centre-half. Danilo and Oral Mangala were flanking Remo Freuler in the middle of the park, and Gibbs White was playing just behind Brennan Johnson and Chris Wood. Now, Baz, we've just got back from the match, and I'm going to start off, before we talk about the game itself, with something that we don't usually do, which is to talk about the table, because I took the liberty of taking a snapshot of the table after yesterday's results. And I'm sure that I'm not the only Forest supporter who, after yesterday's Premier League results, suddenly got a bit twitchy and thought, oh, hang on, we need to look over our shoulders again, don't we?
Yeah, the results basically went against us yesterday, for the most part. It would have been nice to think Everton are dead and buried, and of course our man Sean Dyche seems to have done something there at least. And Leicester winning as well was a bit annoying.
Yeah, so Leicester leapfrogged us in the table and were level on points with us, but with an infinitely superior goal difference after yesterday's results. Everton's victory meant that it's suddenly looking quite congested, having had a little bit of daylight.
And then, of course, if Leeds had won today,
they would have overtaken us in the table.
They'd have leapfrogged us as well, so we would have really been back in the thick of it then.
So, would you have classed today's game as a 6-pointer?
Definitely.
I
think I had it down as like when you looked at the restart after the World Cup. This little run of games, with ignoring the Man United Cup games, looked absolutely vital.
Yeah, and apart from the first league match back, which was United at Old Trafford, which obviously we were well beaten in that one.
And then there was Chelsea, which
basically,
we would have.
Yeah, so
we would have taken the point there. It'd be easy. Exactly.
So I think it's 3 wins and 2 draws. No. Yeah, 3 wins and 2 draws out of that. The draws coming against Chelsea and Bournemouth. So we've got to be very happy with that. And we'll come back to the run of games a little bit later on. Now, on to today's action. We will talk a little bit about what's about the style of play and everything in a bit. Let's talk about the action, because the first thing to note was that Keylor Navas was called into action very, very early on, after less than 2 minutes, when Luis Sinisterra got through in the left-hand channel. Really good through ball from Tyler Adams. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but I was thinking that's 1-0.
Yeah, and what really impressed me, well, 2 things. So, first of all, I think I turned to you and said, that's a good way to start your career here, or something like that. But then what really impressed me was how quickly he reacted and got down to stop it.
And not only did he get down to stop it, he then got up and got the loose ball before anyone else. And that was something that was obviously very, very important. So, having stayed in the match in that early stage, I think it's worth pointing out that, let's talk about his saves before we go on to Forest's action, because there was also a decent save from an effort from Luke Ayling, again across. I mean, I think it's fair to say that Willy Gnonto was at the heart of most good things that Leeds did from an attacking point of view. He's a player who's in form, who's looking confident, looked a bit mardy, but that's what happens when a young player gets frustrated, isn't it? But he was creating lots, and there were a number of chances. There was a moment when Gnonto played the ball in from the left-hand side. Bamford miskicked it. And then Luke Ayling had a shot from sort of about 16, 18 yards out, which was curling towards the bottom corner. Navas had it all the way, didn't he? Parried it out.
Yep.
There was a cross into the box where Navas came and did a flying punch out, and to his own cost, he got injured in the process. There was an effort which actually Sinistera, this has nothing to do with Navas, but Gnonto played the ball in, Sinistera hoofed it over. And then there was also another moment, I think, when there was a Nico Williams did a really poor defensive header, set up Gnonto basically, and his shot was parried away from inside the box by Navas. So really good saves, really athletic saves as well.
Very athletic. And again, the thing that's impressed me with all of them was the speed of his reactions. It was that level of alertness and coupled with the athleticism, so he could react and do the right thing.
And I said, and as I've said many times before, I don't like calling out players, but he's the same age as Wayne Hennessy, and the speed and athleticism and agility that Navas shows to get down to those low saves just knocks Hennessy's ability out of the park, doesn't it?
I have no doubt that particularly that first chance on 2 minutes, I can't see Hennessy saving that because he just wouldn't have reacted in time.
He wouldn't have got down to it.
No.
And I would say possibly the same with the save from Gnonto, where Nico had given the ball away. So some really, really crucial saves. And I have to say, just like you mentioned, what a great start. If you're a goalkeeper, it's so important to impose your authority. And it's a very different type of authority to the Hendersons and Sambas of this world, isn't it?
Yeah. There was very little interacting with the crowd. There was no sort of winding people up. It was just, you can trust me, I will be there.
Yeah, and the defenders responded well to that as well, didn't they? Because, sure, we had to rely on Navas way more than we would have liked in that first half. But I say, when we come to talk about the second half, that authority is very important, isn't it? Let's talk about the goal. Now, Leeds have got Pascal Struijk playing at left back, and I think it's fair to say that he was pretty much left on toast by Brennan Johnson generally in today's match, wasn't he?
Although there was, right at the start of the game, even before the Sinistera chance, he basically upended Johnson in obviously trying to intimidate him in an old-fashioned Stuart Pearce kind of way.
Put in a reducer.
Yeah, and it just didn't work.
Well, Brennan, since the World Cup break, has come back looking confident. He's come back looking athletic and stronger. And
Andy Mouth's back.
Yeah, that's true. He's giving back everything that he's getting now. And the goal came from Brennan breaking down the right-hand side and Struijk unceremoniously stopping him. It was one where Struijk actually argued the toss because Brennan got past him. And Struijk actually shoved him with two hands to stop him going past. So how you can argue with that, I'm not quite sure. And from the resulting free kick, Morgan Gibbs-White put the ball in from near the right-hand touchline. And we noticed between us, didn't we, the movement of Willy Bolly and Chris Wood, both of which contributed to the goal. Yeah,
Bolly in particular made a darting run round the back, out-jumped their defender, knocked it down, and then one of their defenders, I think, knocked it to... basically failed to clear it. It
was a half-headed clearance, wasn't it?
And placed it just for Jono to hit.
And Wood, this is something that I noticed, and whether it's as significant or not, I'm not quite sure, but he made a very late run, and I have a feeling that late run he meant he didn't get near the ball, but I have a feeling that may have helped put off Struijk, who was the defender who was defending it. I say Struijk kind of got a weak-headed clearance. Johnson was about 16 yards out, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And the ball came to him, and let's give credit where it's due, because sure, everyone's going, he's got to hit that, but he hit that with power, with precision, with accuracy. It was very deliberate, but he also put his foot through it, didn't he? It was a really good volleyed goal into the bottom corner.
And proper volley, and he placed it with power. You can't fault it.
And it's one of those that actually gets better the more you watch it as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 1-0 to Forest. Now, we know that the first half ends 1-0 because the whole match ends 1-0. Let's talk about that, because as regular listeners will be aware, you live in Leeds, so you get lots of the Leeds gossip. You deal with the Yorkshire Post headlines. You probably hear loads of the chatter. And Jesse Marsh isn't the most popular man in Leeds, is he?
He's not. Partly, he's quite an emotional character, and I don't think that goes down well with Yorkshire folk. But also the way they play. You add Bielsa, the way he played, and on paper there's a lot of similarities. That very, very high press, that athleticism, the never stop running. But I mean, at half time, I likened the way that Leeds were playing to watching a bunch of 6-year-olds, because every time we got we could not keep the ball and we could not pass the ball. The only times we ever got control of the ball was when it was being played from header to header to header. And the reason for that is because this bunch of 6-year-olds just swarmed over whoever had the ball. But the other thing that 6-year-olds do is when they get the ball, they don't know what to do with it, so they just put their head down and run. And that's pretty much how Leeds played. And
as somebody who's watched under-7s football quite recently, I would be able to absolutely endorse everything you've just said. So, I mean, you brought this isn't a Leeds podcast, obviously, but you brought the Bielsa comparison. I think obviously Bielsa is an impossible job to follow because Bielsa is so calculated, and everything that his players do is absolutely calculated. Yep. Nothing is left to chance. Whereas I get the impression with Leeds that it's just about hustling and harrying and pressing, but then the rest of it is just like, so as you said to me during the match, Gnonto, it's get the ball to Willie and let him do something.
Yeah.
And you gave a really apposite comparison for Forest supporters there, didn't you?
Yeah, which is, it's like if Chris Hughton played a pressing game, that's what Leeds play like. It's basically concentrate on winning the ball back and then let one of the forwards do something. And
also the other comparison that comes to my mind, which I heard, so I can't for the life of me remember who it was, but talking about on the Totally Football show was Alan St Maximan when Steve Bruce was the Newcastle manager, where they were playing a 5-4-1, and it's just like, give the ball to Alan and hopefully he'll do something.
Yeah.
So
it has to be said that the upshot of all that is, although, I mean, I can't imagine what it's like watching that week in, week out, but it did mean that we could not control the ball, we could not do anything, and that's where...
We never got hold of it, did we?
And that's why Navas had to make 4 saves, and we had 1 shot in the entire half.
Crucially, so Leeds were playing 4-2-3-1 with Mark Rocker and Tyler Adams as the double pivot. Forest were playing their usual 4-3-1-2 in the first half, and the midfield were just constantly... It's a strange one, because I was saying that Danilo and Freuler and Mangala, they were doing okay, but they couldn't pass. And you were pointing out it's because there was no room to be able to find a pass. And also, the work that Danilo and Freuler and Mangala were doing was very reactive. So because it was just so congested in that middle third. And that, if that is the tactic by Leeds... It's one of those. You said it must be exhausting being a Leeds fan watching that every week. I think it's one of those. It's a bit like Sabri Ball. If you're winning, you love it. Yeah. But if you're not, then it must be very, very wearing. So something had to change, really. And one of the crucial moments, I think, came when... So we talked about Strauch getting booked. Danilo got a yellow card as well. And I have to say, it's one of those that probably comes under the banner of harsh but fair. But you pointed out... It's probably also the ref doing something to try and keep a lid on things.
Yeah, because, as I say, you've got these players swarming all around you. Tempers were not boiling over, but you could see that there were a few little niggly challenges and a few feet left in. And Danilo just happened to be the one where the ref said, right, that's enough, I've had enough of this.
Yeah, and it's basically a late foot in a challenge, and it brought the man down, but we'd seen plenty of that in the match, so nothing particularly unusual. That's going to be important in just a minute, but as we said earlier, it finished 1-0 to Forest at half-time.
The 1865 Match Report.
This episode is sponsored by State Farm. Buying insurance can be complicated, and you might have a lot of questions, like, what if my policy doesn't cover that? Or, what if I need to make a claim in the middle of the night? Good news, State Farm is there for all your what-ifs. You can reach them 24/7, talk through any questions with your agent, and you can even file a claim on the State Farm mobile app. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or go to statefarm.com to get a quote today.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
So there were 2 substitutions, double substitution by Forest at the break, and it was a little bit surprised to see 2 players. We kind of suspected that Danilo might come off because of the yellow card, and one of the things that was noticeable is after he'd been booked, because Brennan plays so high up on the right-hand side, Danilo's role was to help cover Nico at right-back. And after Danilo was booked, Nico was looking more exposed. So we had to change something to stop the right-back being exposed. The other thing, of course, was that overload in midfield. So the double change saw Mangala and Danilo come off, and it saw Jack Colback and Serge Aurier come on, and cue lots of puzzle-looking faces in around the city ground going, whoa, what's he done there? And the upshot was essentially 4-4-2 with Gibbs White playing as a kind of a split striker, Brennan Johnson on the right wing, and Nico Williams moving from right back to playing left wing. Yeah. And I'm going to say it now, I think that might have been his best 45 minutes of football in a red shirt, don't you?
It was quite impressive. I mean, and again, this comes back to what we were saying the other day about what sort of player is Nico Williams is. He's not an out and out fullback. He is much more attacking than that. And yeah, playing him on the wing like that, he enjoyed himself by the looks of it. Yeah,
and the match was a lot. I wouldn't say the match was much more enjoyable because I'm not sure that's an appropriate phrase, but the players seem to be much more at ease having had that tactical and formation change. Certainly Aurier contributed massively at right back. One thing that I said to you, which I've been trying to find a way to articulate this, is that he's got this ability, he's got very good awareness. So in the split second before he receives the ball, he always seems to know what to do before he takes his first touch. He always seems to know who's around him. So he knows whether he should drive forward, whether he should cut back, whether he should pass it first time, whether he should put his foot on it. And he did that pretty well.
And the other thing, and this is why I guess the Spurs fans were so infuriated with him, was his positioning is actually brilliant. He's really good at cutting out passes and intercepting the ball, apart from every now and then he goes missing.
Yeah, and we did have a Serge moment, didn't we, where he'd gone a bit upfield, and then when the ball came back down his wing, he just looked around and said, all right, lads, you get it, which could have cost us. But that's what you get with it, isn't it? Let's make the point that Forest regained control of the game in that half. One of the crucial. Well, no, I'm gonna put. The reason I say that is because very simply, Navas didn't have a save to make, and the 2 centre halves who played well even in the first half, but they were able to stand head and shoulders, and just when the ball did come in, it wasn't as troubling as. Leeds got into our box a lot in the first half, and they didn't in the second. Yeah. And that is down to a combination of tactical change and also adding those experienced heads in Colback and Aurier. And Colback, what was noticeable is that he was helping out Renan Lodi a lot. It meant that the change also meant that the right-hand side was a little bit more secure, to the extent that actually after Leeds had made their substitutions, bringing on Crescencio Somerville for Luis Sinisterra, a little while after that, they actually swapped their wingers around, put Nyonto on the right wing for a while, and that's because they weren't getting any change.
What I would say is, the change, the fact that we went to 2 central midfielders like that meant that, their Leeds' swarming approach basically was cut out of the game, and it definitely... it made it better to watch because actually people were passing the ball rather than just jostling into each other.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I wasn't a neutral watching this game. Let's just put it that way. But if we talk about moments of action, I mean, in the second half there were a couple of moments. So there's a good break by Brennan Johnson. He crossed it in, and Morgan Gibbs-White headed it. Easy save for Meslier. I think if Morgan would to see that again, he'd realise he had loads more time. He could have actually headed it down for himself to actually set himself up to have a go, and you'd back him in those situations. Sinistera had a chance, but it was straight at Navas, so I wouldn't really count it as a save. And then Sam Surridge, after the ball had come in the box, it came back out again. It was played into left-hand channel by Freuler, I think. And Sam Surridge had what you'd call a Sam Surridge chance. He was on the left-hand corner of the box, cutting across it with his right foot, but he put it wide, and you kind of think, that's the kind of thing where you'd usually back him to hit the target.
You'd expect him to hit the top corner. As you say, it was a Surridge chance. Yeah,
it was. And then late on in stoppage time, I think Leeds' half was summed up really because Somerville tried to curl a shot towards goal and it went nowhere near the goal really. Leeds had also demonstrated their frustration. There are a few scraps, weren't there? And so unsurprisingly, we'd been saying all match about Gnonto's going to lose his rag at some point. And it came from a moment that I think is worth recounting to any fans who weren't there. So Junior Firpo, who'd replaced Pascal Strauch, and I'll come on to why Firpo came on, actually, before we talk about this moment. So Firpo came on because Strauch pushed over Brennan Johnson as he was breaking past him, and that falls very firmly into the ref's going to give a yellow card until he realises that the player's already on a yellow card.
And it was like, I mean, it's not like Johnson, that Strauch was the last man, but Johnson had a free run ahead of him. So, yeah, it should have been a yellow card.
It should have been a yellow card, and immediately Strauch was removed for Firpo to come on. So, Firpo had a throw-in about 30 yards from the Forest byline on the left-hand side in front of Lower Brian Clough.
The ball obviously had gone out for this throw-in.
Yes, and there was a lot of multi-ball
incidents,
jiggery-pokery, wasn't there? So Gnonto, one of the features of the game is that every time the ball went out, Gnonto would retrieve a ball that was on the touchline for the multi-ball system and try and shove it into the palms of Nico or Serge Aurier to just take the free kick, and or to Navas and take the goal kick. And the Forest players would studiously ignore that, wait for the original ball to come back. This time, Firpo picked up a ball off the touchline as he was setting himself the throw in. So I've got my hands over my head, and literally as he was swinging the ball, someone lobbed the original ball out of the crowd, knocked the ball out of Firpo's hands, and bonked him on the back of the head.
Which is quite amusing, but Nonzo wasn't amused.
No, and he booted the ball back into the crowd. And that's one of those where technically the ref should be booking him. It created a little bit of a melee, didn't it? And actually, I think the ref did the right thing by just saying, look.
Yeah, he took him aside.
He very much took him aside.
Literally dragged him away from the other players and gave him a bit of a talking to on his own.
Yeah, and I think it's probably the right decision, isn't it? So Leeds' frustration was boiling over. The thing is that Forest actually, in many ways, the kind of... the thing that people sometimes call professionalism, but we would call gamesmanship, that Leeds might have tried to use in this particular game. Forest played them at everything, didn't they? Right down to corner flagging it in the last 5 minutes. Time wasting, but falling short of getting booked. Yeah. Those kinds of things. There was a brilliant moment just in stoppage time where Leeds won a free kick down near the A block corner, and Serge Aurier went down as if he'd been stabbed in the leg.
Oh my god! And actually, a couple of Forest players came over to him to see if he was all right.
Yeah, And of course, we knew, having watched him go down, he was absolutely fine. And of course, it's just that thing of buying yourself a few seconds to regroup. So there was lots of that going on. And in the end, it was enough, wasn't it? And it's a strange one because Leeds will feel... Apparently, Jesse Marsh in his post-match interview said, we keep finding new ways to lose. And he's saying... We had a really good start. We were on top of the match. We had chances to score, and their set piece was the only chance that Forest had, which is true.
Yep.
But on the whole, over the course of 90 minutes, I would also say that Forest were actually good value. If you look at it in the sense of they took a lead in the first half, and then they regrouped in the second half to find a way to protect that lead and gain a degree of control that they hadn't previously had. So in that sense, I would say it's a good home victory for Forest, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I had received a text off a Leeds fan saying we were better. Which, if and many people would have watched the number of chances going in and said, yeah, Leeds should have won that. But actually, we played a better game of football, is the way to call it.
And maybe this comes back to what we were saying about the kind of the bunch of 6-year-olds thing, which is that Steve Cooper had the tactical nous to change things in a way that meant that Forest could gain some control, whereas Jesse Marsh, being, from the Red Bull Management Academy, it's just about pressing and hustling and the question being, has he got more? Can he offer more with his team than that? Leeds have got a young team, Forest have got a young team, but I think that experience that was added in. I mean, we saw Andre Ayew come on, for example.
To corner flag it.
Yeah, to corner flag it. We saw Aurier and Colback come on, 2 grizzled old pros. So that's what I would say is, what Forest are doing to really... to make the changes to preserve their Premier League status. And that's a pretty good reflection of what the January transfer window was about, wasn't it?
Definitely, yeah.
Steve Cooper said the first half was not a good version of ourselves. The second, defensively, I thought we were excellent. We didn't play so great with the ball, and at times the game didn't really need that. The outcome is the most important thing, and he said to Radio Nottingham, I'm realising that now, but my job is to look deeper than that, work out how to get better. And he made a point of saying that we couldn't afford to have Danilo on that yellow card because this isn't a match we would have got a result with 10 men. But also the experience that we brought on was really, really crucial. It's probably the first time we've not played that well and got and won the game where we've not played that well. So weirdly, the lads deserve that today for the first time. So Cooper, as always, bang on the money with his post-match comments, and as always, he's a genius. He's summed it up perfectly. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Because we're Forest fans and everyone thinks we always look to the past. I can remember there was a point in Billy Davis's first spell in charge of us, and every now and then we'd play this absolutely amazing football. We had some very talented players there, but there was a period for about 2 or 3 months where we just ground out results, and I called us a juggernaut. We just got in the way and flattened anyone that tried to get in our way, and that's what we did today.
Yes, it was definitely a game of attrition. My dad is overseas at the moment, and he sent me a text message, and I said it was a battling victory. And we haven't really had a battling victory so far this season, have we?
No, I don't think we even did really last season. Not where we ground it out like that.
Maybe not. Maybe losing the playoff semi-final second leg to Sheffield United counts as a battling victory in a very strange way because we got the penalties. So it was really interesting to see Forest being able to get results in that way. I'm going to talk very briefly about that home advantage, because home advantage is a key factor in Forest season. Our Tom was on 5 Live talking to Chris Sutton and Robbie Savage last night, and this is what he had to say.
What's the best atmosphere, the City Ground or Ellen Road?
City Ground all day long. Mulligan before the game. We'll get behind the team for 90 minutes, and we've got the Trent 10 to suck the ball in the back of the net, which you'll hopefully see tomorrow.
Baz, right, so obviously that's an adversarial situation created for radio, but it's Forest's fans that are getting us over the line. And even in the games that we've lost at home, Bournemouth is an example, Man United in the Carabao Cup first leg, those games where the team haven't found the extra gear has often coincided with the games where actually the atmosphere's a little bit flat. These things do have a chicken and egg quality, don't they?
Yeah, and I mean, I think so. The atmosphere at the moment is better than I've ever remembered it. It's brilliant because quite often it used to be that it would take the team to kickstart the fans, but it seems to be the other way around at the moment, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and at the start of the match, Forza had put one of their big banners up in the Trent, which, by the way, very amusingly, almost caused all kinds of havoc when they tried to take the banner down and got caught on the gantry. There's a bloke who's jumping down from the stand into the gantry. I'm sure there's going to be a health and safety investigation about that. But things like that, the things like just singing and chanting Steve Cooper's name, the Forester Magic song, those are things where all of a sudden it builds up and you can see that the heads raise slightly and the tempo raises slightly.
I said for the Man United's Carabao Cup game, I thought it was quite negative, and I've been thinking about that. Why was it different? What was different about it? And the key thing that I've noticed actually is during that game, there were a few people yelling at our players saying that was rubbish. And the rest of this season and most of last season, you didn't get that. Even if someone was having a stinker, you might say it to the bloke next to you, but you weren't screaming, "Oi, whoever, you're rubbish."
Do you think this is partly what happens when you get non-regular fans going to cup matches?
Maybe. But, I mean, that is, I mean, even for most of my time watching Forest, regular fans have done that.
Moaning on gits.
Yeah, and we don't do that at the moment. We support our players. If they're having a bad game, we'll applaud them when they get subbed.
Yeah, and the bloke behind me syndrome is it's not a thing of the past quite. I mean, there's a bloke who's a bit in front of us.
Actually, the bloke behind me was annoying me a lot today.
But it's not as noticeable. Maybe you don't notice it as much just when the results are better, I don't know. But I will add in there. So firstly, Cooper wasn't going to do fist pumps.
Yeah,
and we basically press ganged him into it, didn't we? So he gave fist pumps to the Brian Clough stand and to the A block. I don't think he gave them to the Trent.
No, he didn't.
And then the second thing, I'm just thinking about Keylor Navas' experience as a debutant. He got man of the match, and deservedly so for those first half saves. But also, having played for PSG in Madrid, this will almost have took him back to the start of his career, where
it's a tiny little ramshackle stadium,
a small ground, but also fans who are really urging their team on in a way that you don't get when you play for a massive club who have, to coin a phrase, plastic fans. Something that we comment about the Man Uniteds and the Arsenals of this world.
Steve in the Man United report said, it's quite often like that. So thank you to the Forest fans for giving us an atmosphere.
Yeah. So Navas will hopefully have enjoyed that. Gustavo Scarpa before the game was saying he loves the atmosphere. He thinks the songs are funny. I'm not sure what he'll have made of the one about Jimmy Savile, but that's maybe one to explain to him another day. And I think as well, it's worth having a look forward because the next game is an away match. It is away at Craven Cottage, which is another small-ish ground. Home advantage is really important for Fulham. They are a really good team. They're showing the value of Premier League experience, both in terms of management and players. Then we've got Man City at home. Are Man City beatable at the City Ground?
It's a big stretch to say yes, but I can see us scoring more than one goal against them.
West Ham away. That's tough because it's an away match. But again, big stadium, maybe sometimes accused of being a bit soulless.
Distance between the pitch and the fans.
And so if there's a few thousand Forest fans in a block supporting the team, you never know. And of course, with West Ham, you're never quite sure what you're going to get, are you? Then Everton at the City Ground at the beginning of March. Who knows whether it was new manager bounce and whether Everton will revert to type or whether Dyche is going to have a lasting effect. Spurs at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I've been there for a gig. It's a wonderful stadium. I have no idea what it's going to be like on match day. And then Newcastle at the City Ground in mid-March. That's going to be a hot ticket, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very, very good match.
Really tough run of games over the next 6 weeks. So the points we've gained in the last 6 weeks are crucial, aren't they?
Definitely. And yeah, it's quite difficult to see us getting a haul like that for the rest of the season.
But as things stand, Forest are currently in 13th position, so we've gone back above Leicester. We're equal on points with Crystal Palace in 12th, although our goal difference is 8 goals poorer. And we currently have 6 points between us and Everton, who take the last relegation place. So we've developed that little cushion again. It's congested in the bottom half of the table, isn't it, Baz?
But then you also look upwards a little bit, and we're not that far from some very big names. So it's quite a turnaround from where we were a few months ago.
And I'm just going to finish by pointing out what you said in the car on the way to the match, which is, could Forest finish above Liverpool? And, okay, we will leave. There's nowhere we can go from there. So I'm going to say thank you to you, Baz. Thank you for Tom for joining Savage and Sutton on 606. Thank you to you, listener, for joining us. And thank you to the 1865 podcast on production duties. We'll be back after the Fulham match.
Where is the better night out? Nottingham or Leeds, Tom?
Nottingham. They've got 9 bars within a square mile, and we have a Hooters.
Sports Social Podcast Network. Football Social Daily.
This week on Football Social Daily, we've been speaking to former West Ham and Wolves winger Matt Jarvis.
I was actually going away on a boys' holiday. I was just about to get in the taxi to go to the airport, and I got a call from my agent to say that Mick McCarthy wanted to meet me in Portugal. I then flew to Portugal, met Mick McCarthy, flew back, signed my contract. I shared a lift with him and his wife to the airport. We all got on the same flight to Marbella. I went one way and he went the other, and I met my mates in Marbella.
You can hear the full chat with Jarvo on Football Social Daily, wherever you get your podcasts.
Football